Hello and welcome to episode 14 of What the Tech. My name is Adam Lobo.
And I'm Vernon. Glad to be back. So happy to see you guys.
And today is, of course, back to our news and more discussions that we want to have. For today, we'll be talking about Donald Trump's U-turn. I didn't want to talk about politics, but I guess we have to address the elephant in the room. And no, the elephant is not Donald Trump. iPhone foldable rumors are back. So we're going to address that. Canva is becoming a gangster because they want to challenge Google and Microsoft. And there's this huge rumor about how iPadOS 19 is going to be very close to macOS. And we have a very interesting community segment post where we asked whether or not is it worth it to get a flagship phone these days because of how mid-range smartphones are doing so well. We had 200 over votes. So thank you guys so much for voting. Appreciate it. And as usual, we'll be talking about that and going through the comments to discuss about that particular form factor, but the idea of why people are doing this, which also gives me an idea to actually do a video about this, because I think it's a topic that we can not only discuss about it here in the podcast, but also at the same time to give you a bit more context of what the people are saying about that as well. The video releases recap, that is something we'll be also talking about at the end of the podcast. But let's start off from the Donald Trump U-turn, right? So, like I said, the whole idea of this story, because I am not a fan of politics in general. Mm-hmm. When I heard about this,
we stick to tech.
Yeah, we always stick to tech. But I guess because it does affect the whole tech industry, and people have been approaching me not only via DM on Instagram, but also specifically when they see me say, howla, is iPhone's going to be costing about 10,000 ringgit because of this whole matter. Now, that whole TLDR of everything, first and foremost, when he imposed the tariffs, I just kept quiet about it. But right now, he's actually not going to be imposing tariffs on smartphones and electronics. There are certain things which Vernon is going to go through in a short moment. Now, why it matters is because this is a major shift that could affect the global tech pricing again, because specifically for the US imports for Apple, Samsung, and Chinese brands. And this could be motivated because of definitely behind the scenes and companies and countries having backlash as well. So could this be something that we need to watch upon, because we need to see how the market reacts? Mm-hmm. And if manufacturers are going to now adjust the pricing to meet this, it's going to be very tricky, because when NAB happened in Las Vegas, Blackmagic came out with tons of cameras, like new cameras. Yeah. And whenever I watch those videos, whenever the media like ask question about the pricing and all, they don't know how to say, because they do not know, because that is not one of the items which is not exempted, right? So, Vernon, are we finally safe from a 2,000 USD phones, or is this another political window dressing?
Okay, so disclaimer, I'm not an economist, so I'm not an expert in this trade tariffs thing. Also not a fan of politics so much. I think we prefer to talk about tech. But I think, like Adam said, there are implications on the tech industry as a whole. And also as us as consumers, right? There may be implications. There are rumors of an iPhone costing $10,000 or whatever. I don't know. But I think it's important to understand what a tariff is. In very simple terms, a tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. So if you're a country, you're importing something and somebody wants to export to you, you put a tax on it. And why do countries do this? Well, number one, I think it's also revenue. The first and foremost is a source of income for the country.
Yeah.
So whenever something that comes in, we put a tax on it and we get that money for the country. Number two is it could be done to protect the domestic market. I think Trump's argument was that, why can't you make the iPhone in America? Bring that manufacturing from China to America. Why can't we do that? So it's to encourage the people to manufacture local, buy local. So you cut you reduce the reliance on imports, so to speak. Yeah, and then I feel the entire exercise is really a bargaining chip. It's bargaining chip for something else. It's not about the trade so much, maybe. And some countries do it to retaliate.
Yeah,
so, for
I've
instance,
noticed.
if like recently, I mean, a good example would be America putting a 150% tariff on China products and goods. China retaliates by putting 500. That kind of thing, and it's gonna be just this tit for tat thing that could happen.
Yeah.
And then what are the implications? I mean, something very clear that we see in the technology space is the supply chain. The supply chain is disrupted. And if you've watched that video of Tim Cook talking about why America cannot make the iPhone domestically, right, in America, and he explained that, I mean, China was always known as this place where labor is cheap. But I don't think China is cheap anymore. But the main thing and a takeaway from that is that it's the skilled labor that China has, and it's the mass of skilled labor that China has that America doesn't have. It's not just about the cost, but it's about the entire ecosystem that China has for supply chain and manufacturing.
Yeah.
That's something you cannot build overnight, not in America anyways.
Yeah.
So it's just why China is such a key player in this manufacturing industry. And I think the implications also is, for instance, if we're talking just about Apple, if components cost more, imported components, and we know that within the iPhone, everything is from all over the world, right? And a lot of it is from China. Chips and all that stuff, right? Taiwan, TSMC produces the chips for Apple. So it will increase the cost of the device and making of the device.
Yeah.
It could be twofold, it could be threefold, who knows, right? And the question is, what does the company do? Does it increase the price? Or does it adapt by not increasing the price, but lowering its margins, meaning you make less money, right? Or it could be a combination of both, right?
Yeah.
Or like what Apple has done even before this tariffs is move manufacturing out of China. We have Mac Minis made in Malaysia. We have some iPhones made in India and places like Vietnam and stuff like that. So you're going to see that move for some of the companies to other countries out of China. So that could be an implication. And for us consumers, more expensive device means it affects our budget. It affects affordability. Maybe we don't upgrade as much. Maybe we don't buy tech stuff as much.
Or maybe you just don't buy American brand phone then. Could that be one of the things that...
Yeah, whatever. There could be a shift in definitely a shift in consumer behavior and our choices.
Yeah.
We have less choice. Like in Malaysia, we have to look at Forex as well, right? 4 times the price of what they're paying back in America. So it's different.
But do you think that even if these tariffs were not imposed, are people really just going to say, okay, I'm not going to buy an iPhone anymore because it's too expensive? Because at this current time, iPhones are not the most cheapest phones anyway. But
and
you
also
still
not the most expensive.
That's
if you
true.
look at it, right?
Yeah. So if it comes to that point, if there's no U-turn, do you feel that people will totally not buy an iPhone, or they'll still try to find a way to buy an iPhone? Or maybe there's a telco discount and how you can afford an iPhone. So do you think that it can still really affect American brands like iPhone, for example?
So I feel that question is very interesting because in calamity, right, there's always innovation. So innovation is going to come out from somewhere, whether it's through manufacturing to cut cost, relocation, new processes, using AI, I don't know, in manufacturing or whatever. But companies and businesses will find a way to address that.
Yeah.
And so we may allow for that time that to happen in time. And then as consumers, right now it's very up in the air. And you talked about the U-turn, right? So certain items, let me just go through it. Smartphones, laptops, hard drives, computer chips, flat panel display. I don't know why it's flat panel per se, but so specific. But flat panel displays and monitors, machines that make semiconductors. So they're kind of protecting the semiconductor space because they realize that, oh crap, it affects a whole lot of products and services in the world.
That's true.
But what remains is bad news for people who love gaming consoles, because that hasn't been lifted. Smart TVs and digital cameras not been lifted. Bluetooth speakers, smart locks, lithium-ion batteries, desktop PCs and components. Wow, that's a big ouch, I feel.
It is.
So GPUs are might cost more. Building a PC might cost more. You being a gamer and trying to buy the new Switch 2 might cost even more now.
It's weird because when you say that machines used in manufacturing semiconductors, so the machines are not are not charged, but then the components is. So it's like, make up your mind. It's weird. And video game consoles, just last week we were complaining about how, actually 2 weeks ago, we were complaining about how the Nintendo Switch 2 is already so expensive. So this is gonna make things even harder.
I mean, if this stays on, there is always a possibility that devices will cost a lot more, right?
And also another gray area is the fact that while the gaming consoles, you got the tariff issue, but for the video games, no. So it's like, I feel it's so much of a gray area.
Because the video games itself are already so expensive.
That's true. But okay, we talked about affecting you as a consumer. For me, I am not very happy specifically on the digital camera point of view, because of course we are a video production company still, knowing the fact that, that is going to be charged and that can be potentially very expensive. Thank God that all the cameras that you see here in the podcast have been already bought. But there are some other production cameras that we need to upgrade by now because it's been a while. And Blackmagic came up with some really great cameras. And we had the recent NAB in Las Vegas. And whenever any media team goes up to Blackmagic and asks them about the price, and they were like, oh, we still do not know, but just look at the website. But Blackmagic being Blackmagic, I think they might do what you say, like they might absorb the cost in order for them to let the users or the consumers to afford that. Yeah. For you personally, which segment do you feel affects you in terms of the video game consoles, the smart TVs, the Bluetooth speakers, the desktop PCs and component? Because like me, you're a Mac user, so this may not be your major thing, but which area which you feel that will affect you personally?
I would say smart TVs, digital cameras, desktop PCs and components, because I do have a PC as well, and I build PCs for fun. But I mean, GPUs at one stage was already incredibly expensive, and the prices have sort of come down over the past 6 months or so, a year. But looking at it going up again, I think it's really not good for the industry overall, and also for consumers. Yeah. And I mean, there are deeper implications aside from tech, and it trickles down to job creation, inflation, because you get inflation price, right? It might, further along the lines, if people stop spending because they don't have money anymore to afford these kind of devices, they may stop spending, and it impacts the entire business circle and economy, and we could go into recession, that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more complex than what we see. We're looking at it at a very tiny kind of through a tiny lens, but
I think the purpose of us again talking about this particular topic is not so much on what we think politically. It's more like letting you guys know that there is a U-turn. And like I said earlier in the beginning of the podcast, is because a lot of people ask, hey, is this true? So yes, it is true. So if you want to see the exact list, you can head on to our website and check it out as well.
Okay, so the point is, right now we can't do anything because we don't know what is going to happen. There's a pause for 90 days on tariffs. And of course, there's a U-turn on certain products. But really, the answer is you got to wait and see. I think just yesterday, a friend was asking me, should I buy a Mac now, or will the prices go up? I mean, if you need to buy it now, you buy it now.
Yeah.
But I would also wait and see if you can, if it's not a rushed kind of purchase.
It's the same argument when I watched Dave Tourier's video when Dave mentioned about when you should buy a Mac. In general, this is before this whole idea.
Yeah.
And
It's
in
not
this,
a new question. It's quite common.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very common question. And in his video, he's mentioning, I love the good dude. Met him so many times. Nicest guy on planet Earth. And he said in his video that if you need to buy a Mac now, just buy it now. You don't have to wait. You need to buy a Windows laptop, just buy it now. Don't wait for a month or a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. If you can afford it, just get it now. Because in the end of the day, if you don't need it, why you have even that question? Because tomorrow is going to increase the price. But if you need it now, just go and get it now.
Because and also it's tech, right? So there's always going to be something new, something better.
Exactly.
So if you're not going to buy now, then when?
Yeah, we even had that discussion
Wait
about the
forever.
whole Mac Mini situation. Remember, like who would have thought that just like that? Imagine people who bought the previous generation Mac Mini and then
Like me,
after
I
that,
had the Mac Mini 1,
oh, there you
M1.
go.
Yeah.
And then after you had a really small, cute fella.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I think that's why, in the end of the day,
No regrets, just buy both.
For those of you who are listening, if you ever thought about buying any product, whether it's a smartphone, don't contemplate on waiting. If you really need it, then just get it now. If you feel like you can wait, then just wait. But if the prices increase, don't beat yourself about it because that's really beyond anybody's control, your control, or even us as tech reviewers. Okay, let's finally go away from this political related, although it's not something that we like to talk about. But like I said, we have to address the fact that the U-turns do affect on certain products, especially from the tech scene.
Yeah.
So another thing which came back again, because this thing came back and forth a lot of times, is the foldable iPhone rumors, right? So it's back again. This time it was more on apparently the rumor about how there's the under-display selfie camera, something that Samsung have been struggling to get the best. Would love to know your thoughts about that. And then the expected release is 2026 to 2027, which I doubt it. But again, we'll talk about that. And of course, the form factor. The rumors are suggesting that it's going to look something like that, more like your fold instead of a flip. I personally think like the clamshell kind of design would be probably more in the works, but you have to wait and see.
What if they made two? Would you agree to that? Or
if they made two, I don't think they will do it, but who knows? But my question to you is that, do you think that Apple is already late to the foldable game, or they're just waiting for the perfect moment to crush it, or they're just not gonna come up with a foldable at all?
I mean, we ask that question every time, and Apple is almost never the first in many ways, in many products.
The Apple Vision Pro was the first.
Not really. Headsets were never. They were not.
But
they
the
were
way
not
they
new in
did
headset.
it, the way they did it was different, right? It was like out of no one has created a similar product to Apple Vision Pro. So I personally feel like they were first there.
Okay.
I can't think of any others, but there are certain
they're not
areas.
first.
but
Like
yeah.
They were not first making phones. They were not first making laptops. They were not first making a desktop computer. A lot more, right? iPod. They were not the first, but they always strive to be the best thing that came out in that particular segment.
Okay.
So if they decide that, I think let's do a foldable. I think there's a market for it. I think we have our own take, which we feel that will innovate and be the best that can be. Then I think they will go into foldable.
Okay.
So I cannot answer for you. I cannot answer for everyone out there. But if Apple thinks so, I think they will do it. Rumors point to it, and this has been rumors for so many years.
Exactly.
It's not something new even. But I mean, the question now is the under screen camera, under display camera. But my question is, why do we need an Apple foldable? And what problem does it solve as for consumer? Are they trying to bridge the gap between a phone and a tablet? And they already have an iPad line that's quite mature and an iPhone line that's expanding. So now instead of like 4 devices, you're going to have another 6 or 7 devices. Wow, that's a lot. So I don't know. And also, I feel there is a bit of a catch up because in terms of what we recognize right now in the industry, everyone else has done a foldable, and it's just Apple being the last one.
Yeah.
How does that fit into like a brand perception thing?
How about the under-display selfie camera? Do you think that Apple will go down that particular route? Because you know how like they really take a huge pride in their selfie cameras. Do you think they will do such of a compromise like what the rumors say?
A compromise in what way?
Compromise in terms of their front cameras have always been one of the best, right? Especially dynamic range, your HDR, getting proper exposure for the face and the background. So do you think that they will say that, okay, look, I'm going to put in an under-display selfie camera if they're going to release a foldable phone?
I would believe so because again, when you look at it, it's going to be super clean, super minimalistic. That's what Apple does, right? They're just trying to make it clean.
Okay.
The notch was something questionable, but it became something that people talked about. And instantly, when you look at a phone with a notch at that point in time, you knew that was an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's now copied all over the world. So we've moved away from that. But I guess what Apple usually does is make something or put something in there that people can talk about. And the under display would probably be something that people talk about. Who knows?
Interesting.
Right?
My views is that I have 2 different options, right? Option 1 is that Apple might not even have a camera inside. They'll say like, you know what? You don't take selfies this big of a screen. And once you fold it, I'll put the selfie camera on top with a notch and Face ID. That is one option.
Interesting.
Yes. Another option is to have a big notch in when you open it.
No.
Because look, why does the MacBook Pro have a notch? Because it has no Face ID until today, right? So if you think about it, there's a potential to put a Face ID in the MacBook Pro, which Apple is not putting it until now. So you want to say about a topic where they can talk about? That is a topic. Because when you open, instead of all screen, you might have a big notch there with a Face ID. So that could be one of the 2 things that might happen, right? Because, oh my God, guys, look at the notch in the so-called foldable phone.
Yeah.
So that's how I see things. They might go extreme or just like don't even have it.
This is an interesting conversation because I think they've done it the same way with even Dynamic Island. Do we need Dynamic Island? Why couldn't they put an under-display camera? They could have, right?
But for you as a user, you've used the foldables and all when it came out. Like for me too, as my daily Android device. I never used the in-display selfie knowing the fact that it's going to look ugly. Yeah. So why is there even a need to even put the display, to put a camera under the display in the first place? Just take it out lah, right? True. So what do you think? Do you actually use that camera?
No.
Right?
No.
So what's the point of using it? So it's either you do a Huawei and just put a camera hole there, which again, like when I was using the Mate X6 or even the Mate XT, I never needed to even bother using any other camera except for the rear cameras because of the fact that you have that option. So if you're going to have a foldable already, might as well just don't bother putting a camera there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We would love to know your thoughts.
Yes.
We have separate thoughts on this, which is lovely. But would you prefer to have under-display camera like this rumor, or do you all feel like just don't have a camera? For me, I'm leaning towards not even having a camera over there because it's just going to be redundant anyway, right?
One question I want to ask you is, what about the crease? We know that Samsung is building this display because only they have the technology, right? At least the best ones. and it's rumored to be near creaseless.
Oh,
I mean, I'll believe it when I see it.
yeah.
But I think in the industry, when you look at it, it is improving.
It is. Like
it is
the
getting
Oppo
better.
Find N5 is the best foldable smartphone for me this year. The crease is very
Not very
less.
noticeable, yeah.
But I know a lot of people like Mo, he couldn't take the fact that there's a crease when the Fold series came out. I am one of the very few people, I believe, that I don't mind a crease. I can like train my mind to just ignore it.
You kind of unsee it.
Yes, it's same like the Google Pixel 9a, which review coming really soon. The bezels are thick, like as thick as my eyebrows. But when I started using the phone, on the second day, I've already learned to adapt to the bezels, right? And the crease does not really affect me as much as I know a lot of people does. Does it affect you?
A little bit.
Oh, it does?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Because coming from like a design perspective, being a creative, right? It's once you see something, it's kind of hard to.
I think another reason is because I've been using a lot of the Z series, the Z Fold series, and the software optimization, the software multitasking has actually really became so much nicer to a point where I didn't even bother with the crease. Right. But we know it's possible because Oppo did it and Huawei also has done it. So it doesn't really bother me. Going back to your question, whether or not I feel like Apple's going to do it, Apple still doesn't come up with their own display per se, right? But if they need
that would
something
be a huge
to
undertaking for them to go into that.
Exactly. And remember, like I said before, and even people like John Prosser say that if you are going to create something, anything from Apple, you need to think about the amount of MOQs, the minimum quantity of units you have to do.
Yeah.
Like the billions of iPhones needs to be produced. So if they're going to do something, they need to make sure that it's within their capacity, whether or not they can have crease.
But of course, this is not a volume model. It's not going to mass. I mean, based on reports, they expect, if it launches in 2026, 27, 3 to 5 million units globally in the first year. So it's not the same kind of volume that you get from a regular iPhone, but still substantial for that space. Yeah.
How about a year? They said between 2026 to 2027. Do you think that is too soon?
We will know more surely during WWDC when the coders look into the code and they see an Apple foldable code name in there somewhere. That's what usually happens.
Yes, they will see like that code name. You're right.
Like in iOS, within the code, they would probably see something that ties into the iPhone because you need optimizations for screen resolution, blah blah blah, and all that stuff. You see that in the code.
That's
it will be revealed.
Yes, it will be.
Stay tuned, 2026. VW. WWW. Yeah.
Okay, there is another story which is based on Canva. Now, Canva is apparently being a gangster now because they said that not only I want to take on Adobe with their Photoshop because almost nobody, except for probably more, uses Adobe Photoshop. Just kidding. There's also a new challenge because they came up with their own version of Sheets or Excel.
Yeah, spreadsheet.
So it seems like they are not only going towards the design, but they're also going into the document side of things. Now, what's interesting is that they have launched this spreadsheet tool and it's quite powerful. I just played around with it. And
you have?
Yeah, and because I have Canva Pro. And
so is it on a trial basis? Or?
The thing is that I just feel like it is something which I never really go in deep as much, but I like the fact that it is a tool or visual first, which means that it's not so much on arranging numbers, for example. They really want to make sure that it's a bit more infographics kind of thing.
Right.
And so imagine like you can come up with better planning, more visual planning, things like maybe like just imagine like your Google Analytics, you put it on a sheet per se. Because, I think what Canva wants to do over here is to make sure that Canva is not only for Instagram and social media posts and some reel that you can edit, but also to challenge. Do you think that at this point in time that they can actually challenge the Googles and the Microsoft of the world who have been doing this for the longest time?
I mean, the value proposition here is that it's more of a creative tool, or at least, like you mentioned, a visual first approach to something so boring like Excel sheets. That's their different take on it. And Canva has always been a creative company. So it's really a creative tool for people out there who may not be professionals, right? You have marketers, you have people working in businesses, small businesses, who do not need that capacity of Photoshop or Illustrator or the Adobe suite to be able to pull out, visuals and collaterals. Right?
Yeah.
So this is another tool, an alternative to the Microsofts and the Googles of the world, and I feel even looking at the UI and the UX is very friendly.
Yes.
It's a bit more fun, and it's easy to visualize data. So if you have a table of data, it will help you create a chart easily, or visualize it into something else. And infographics, like you were saying, is very dynamic, and I feel that that's a new take on it. I feel it will appeal to people like me who find Excel sheets really boring and overwhelming, and that kind of thing. And the good thing about Canva is it has 230 million monthly users, which is a lot where they can tap into.
Yeah.
It's unclear how they're gonna offer this. I'm not sure if it's a freemium or it's not stated.
They are rolling it out like slowly. So for me as a pro user, you can already kind of, so it's not for everyone yet, but they're slowly kind of releasing this. Yeah, we will have to just wait and see whether how good is this. And for me, in the end of the day, I think because of the fact they are web based, and yes, Google Sheets and is also web based.
Yeah.
And I feel when they are going with visual first, it has made it a bit more exciting to create on Canva. And the responsiveness for Canva has always been really great. The templates have been great. Templates is one of the things where I remember like 10 years ago, because I use a Mac, so I use Keynote presentations. When presentations, I don't even use PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint. So when I use Keynote, I used to go and try to download and pay on Envato templates.
Right, for templates. Professional
design for templates, so I can just take it from Keynote. I used to do this when I was in Astro Radio specifically. But imagine now that you don't have to do it. Like, you can just do it with Canva, and the way that they produce their visuals has always been one of the best. And that's the reason why we are a pro subscription. Whether or not they're going to be taking over, do you think like there's a timeline, or do you feel like there's going to be like a separate audience for the Canva and also the Google Sheets of the world?
I would say the question is, can it win in this game against, the heavyweights of Microsoft and Google? I think you mentioned a little bit like, can it take away some of the users? I feel they can. And I feel you cannot underestimate Canva because it has already disrupted and democratized creative tools, against people like Adobe and all that stuff. And the numbers speak for itself. I mean, 230 million is quite a lot of users. The important thing is it good enough to sway some of the power users of Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets to Canva? I think that's the main question.
The main issue also is the collaboration, because
the collaboration with Canva's tools, or
that means like, for example, like, if you do a Google Sheet, I can share it with you. You can be an editor, and then you can just edit.
That exists in Canva Sheets.
So there is a collaboration as well. Okay, I didn't check on that. So
that's one of the USPs for Canva.
Okay, so as long as they have the collaboration, then I feel like they are going to disrupt the market, because again, it all comes down to the ecosystem. We always talk about that. So if there are amount of users who have been using Canva, especially for the pro subscription, then if they can just share it and collaborate accordingly, then that would be
absolutely.
a very good
I
thing.
mean, as a pro user, I guess they might just bundle Sheets under that pro subscription model and just build other products.
Yeah.
Just like Adobe is doing for the Creative Suite, right? They have many products that they produce and put it under the subscription. I think the good thing about Canva is also the ability to import data from third-party sources like HubSpot or Statista or even Google Analytics, because that's what marketers would need, right?
Yes.
When doing a Excel sheet or.
But it's quite interesting. Who would have thought? I think like the way they are growing is just madness, right? I mean, they just started off by just creating simple images. Yeah. Then they went into video, and right now they actually created their own sheet. So it's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
But I would root for this kind of companies.
Yeah, it's like a challenger.
Yeah, it's like Canva or even Notion. Notion has their own calendar right now. So it's nice, right? At least you have like different options to choose from.
Shake the tree a bit, shake the monopoly.
Exactly.
Kind of thing, some competition is always good.
The next thing we can talk about is there's a recent report from Bloomberg. I believe it could be our friendly friend who's always there from Bloomberg. And apparently, I don't believe it is, but I want to know your thoughts, is that iPadOS 19 will make your iPad feel more like a Mac.
They promised that in 18, they promised that in 17.
They didn't promise though, it's the rumor fillers. If you think about it, it's every year the same rumor. That's why I'm sick and tired. But it is floating around, and that's the reason why Syed wrote about it, which I understand.
Yeah.
But every year we're hearing this.
I mean, as an iPad user, do I want it to work like macOS? No, not really.
Okay.
Because macOS is really not a touch optimized, which is why we have a separate iPadOS. And remember the days when iPads was running in iOS. So it was Apple spin it off to make it a little bit more dedicated, because that makes sense. Different devices have different user experience. But I want to ask, what does desktop-like environment mean? What does it really mean? I've been trying to crack my head on what the definition of that is. Desktop environment, does it need to feel Windowsy or Mac OS-y or
because currently with the new iPad OS, it has that almost closeness, but at the same time it's not.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a very good point, because what do they mean by is going to be like a Mac? Unless you're telling me that Final Cut Pro for the iPad is going to be exactly like the desktop, or every single desktop software is going to be the same. Otherwise, what do you mean by it's going to be as close to more like a Mac?
Yeah, but
what are people asking for?
I'm not really sure. For sure, it's not a straight up port of macOS. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
I think iPad OS has grown, has become better. It's not perfect. I hate the file management system. If you can resonate with me, it's I feel it's very clunky in the way you try and move things around. It's very messy. How you manage files within iPad OS is different from macOS. They've made it better. Yes, I credit to them, but it's still not there yet, I feel. And I feel that the iPad has an identity crisis. You know, previously it was a consumer device where you consume media and all that stuff. And then the Pro came and they were trying to position it as a productivity device and give it more pro features. It's super powerful as a hardware. I mean, it's more than enough power for anybody, even to do work like Final Cut Pro and all that stuff. But yeah, you're right. iPad apps are not the same as macOS apps. And a lot of times they feel very limited. We have Photoshop and stuff like that, but it's not the full Photoshop that we get on a desktop. And for pros, for simple work on the go, it's okay. But for it to replace a real MacBook or Mac Mini or Mac Pro, definitely not. Yeah. But I honestly still feel that the file management is terrible.
Okay.
So if they were to improve that for iPad OS 19.
I'm okay with the file management because it's a similar file management to the iPhone, and I shoot ProRes a lot, so I'm okay with that. But I agree that the Mac file management is a million times better, of course, because of how you have everything. And I don't transfer all the files back and forth on the iPad. That's another thing. So I'm okay with the file manager because of it's similar like iOS. But I also really agree with what you mean by how they have become somewhat of having an identity crisis. Like, where do you actually position them?
Your laptop or your phone or you what?
Yeah. So I think it all comes down to the type of apps that you use. That's about it. So because right now with apps like Freeform and all, where people use it to sketch their own ideas and their own app, their vision board and stuff like that, knowing the fact that it still syncs with your Mac and also syncs with your iPhone, that is great. I still feel like the iPad Pro or iPad in general is a very good media consumption device.
It is very good, yes.
Whether I would not welcome the iPad to be Mac OS, I would say no, because I would love to have full-fledged Final Cut Pro on the iPad Pro so I can carry this, because my MacBook Pro 16-inch is heavy.
Yeah.
And I would welcome it. But whether or not I really want it so badly, I would say no, because I'm happy with my MacBook Air, for example. So, but I agree with you. Every single year we're talking about this. So again, I guess we have to wait and see for Dub this year to see whether or not it's true. I think we are both echoing on the same idea that we don't think that is even true. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below once again. Okay, the final thing that we're going to be addressing, this one I believe we should kind of take a little more time to talk about, which is our community segment. So we asked on our YouTube community tab post, and I like this because a lot of people have been participating on this. Whether or not you're participating in this particular video, you can also participate there and then we can talk about it. We'll address. So the question is that, do you think a flagship is worth getting these days, or a mid-range or premium mid-range devices enough for day-to-day use? So we had quite a amount of votes, like I said, a total of 200 over votes, which was really nice to know. Let's address, before we go into the comments, I want to know what are your thoughts about that first. Like, just give your plain and simple answer, yes or no, or whether or not you're in between.
This is going to be a very personal kind of take, right?
Okay.
I think it's a very individual and personal decision whether you buy flagship or mid-range and you think mid-range is good enough. For me, it depends on what device I'm buying. If I buy an iPhone, it's okay to buy the mid-range. If I buy an Android, I don't want to buy a mid-range Android.
Oh, that's an interesting fact. Okay.
Even though when you look at it as a whole, mid-range phones have come so far. They are so good. The baseline is, the benchmark is really high.
Yeah.
And flagships are flagships. Obviously, you pay good money to get a flagship and you get the best of the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say the same thing. For Android, I wouldn't buy a mid-range.
Okay.
But for iPhone, I think it's good enough if I bought a mid-range. Yeah.
For me, I need the flagship. I'm going to be clear and honest. Reason being, okay, if you want to divide into iPhones and Androids, I'll tell you why. Very quick one. iPhones, because I need ProRes. I need ProRes in order to survive, because I've been using the ProRes recording more than even using my Blackmagic or even the Sony cameras. So
you shoot that for footage? Or okay.
I've been shooting that for footage. I've been shooting that, like the upcoming Sonos review, my A-roll is fully done on the iPhone. Even the B-roll, I'm thinking, should I even use maybe I'll use the iPhone.
I remember those days where I shot purely on the iPhone too.
Yes, I know.
Before I got a camera back. Yeah.
So for me, that's the reason why I need the flagship iPhones. Unless you're telling me that the baseline the baseline is going to have ProRes. Then I'm like, it'll still get me thinking. But I like the versatility that the added cameras have. But then again, that is from a creator's perspective, right? So that's the reason why I would go with a flagship iPhone.
But as a regular consumer.
But I'm not a regular consumer, right? So again, this is just my opinion, kan? For Android specifically, I will also go with a flagship because of the added cameras. Again, it comes down to that. But it's more so on the software updates.
All right. Cool.
Because we all know that the mid-range devices is good. I mean, the cameras are great, the software is great at the time of the launch. But as year pass by, especially with the slightly, not major delay, but there is a slight delay in the software update, that's where you go like, hi, I should have just bought a flagship. But I agree with you in terms of how, if you buy a Android mid-range phone, it can last you for so long. Like the Poco users of the world, the Xiaomi T series, you can last for a long time. But like I said, this is just me. So that is our contrasting opinions, which I love. Now let's talk about.
Okay, so the community segments is.
So the community segment.
The mid-range wins.
The mid-range wins because there's a 60% more on the mid-range guys. Yeah. So a lot of people might not like my answer, but again, it's just my opinion.
But I think there's a question of value for money, right? If you get what you pay for, and if you're happy with mid-range phone and it ticks all the boxes for you on the device and you're happy with it, that's fine. Of course, flagship, your expectations are different. Yeah. And the money that comes out of the pocket is different as well.
Yeah. Let's address I like to address directly their questions so that, because the replies were minimal, because I thought that instead of us texting and replying it, we can reply here to encourage you all to come and talk to us. First comment came from Felix. He said, mid-range cost per use, cost per features, wallet friendly, flagship devalues fast, and battery degrades significantly in 2 to 3 years. Also, if the phone gets stolen, the loss will be not that painful. What are your thoughts about his comment?
No, I mean he's right, and all the questions are right. What he says is right, and I agree with him.
Do you agree with the flagship devalues fast though?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, that I don't.
Yeah, that's that. So my point is, I don't agree with that.
Devalues fast? Not really. I think they devalue at the same rate for all phones. Yeah. But maybe flagships actually hold the value a bit better than the rest.
I also don't agree with the battery degrading because battery degrading happens for every smartphones.
Yeah, again,
not only the flagship.
I don't agree. Yeah.
But I am.
But the rest, yes. Yeah.
The rest, what he says, like I agree, is cost per use, cost per feature. You're right, buddy. And yes, if your phone gets stolen, you don't feel that painful. So
True.
yeah. Then we have Marcus. He said even mid-range ones are now being able to record with 4K 60 FPS LMAO. That's true.
Like what I said, the baseline is very high. Even a mid-range phone is
but
very
not every
good.
Like for example,
sure.
like remember my biggest argument about Poco phones is the fact that you cannot record 4K front camera, you cannot record 4K ultra wide camera. So this is a give and take. But thank you, Marcus, for your feedback.
Cool, very good question.
One day ago, there's this person named Plum Pimpin. Feel like majority of consumer buy flagships just so they can say they have the latest and greatest, which of course I have no problem with that, but also most of them could save a lot of money by getting a mid-range phone. What are your thoughts about that?
Also a personal choice. I mean, some people buy devices for different reasons. One is maybe you're an early adopter and you want to have the latest device all the time. It's an emotional thing. Yeah. Some people buy it to show off, like, okay, I buy the latest iPhone 16 Pro Max and I can put it on a table and people say, ooh, that's the new iPhone.
It's like a kaki.
Or I have a foldable. And people say,
it's like a kaki, like you put.
Absolutely. So there's an emotional thing, right?
Yeah.
But others don't really care. They buy the flagship because they think that is the best phone. That's going to give me the best camera, the best battery life, the best user experience.
How about,
that's what they expect.
Okay, this just came to my mind, but how about the whole telco thing? You know how like people can afford phones, the flagship because of telco, and then some of the telcos offer this thing whereby like after you're done within a year or two, and then you upgrade, you just give back the phone. Yeah. What if you are in that situation? Is that something that you would do as well?
Yeah, I would. I mean, being an early adopter, it gives you a choice to, and this product or service was created for people like me and you, for early adopters, right?
Yeah, correct.
They know you're going to upgrade every single year or at least every other year.
Correct.
So it makes it easy and seamless for you to do that, which makes sense.
So yeah, that's a very interesting point, Plump. Zest 1989 says the phone price range below 2,000 ringgit are more than enough for normal daily use. But I'm going to go with a Samsung flagship anyway for maximum performance. right? So you and I agree with
I
that.
mean, it's very reflective of what we think.
Yeah.
I think in general, people think that way as well.
Yeah. Then, of course, we have Half Crazy say, I'm okay with mid-range phones. Just Junior Jaw says, the 80-20 rule just isn't for flagship. The 80% in a mid-range is simply far better feature-wise than 20% of a flagship. I find this comment to be very confusing. Yeah. So I don't understand. That's why I'm putting it to you because apa English you cakap? So yeah.
I think that what he's saying is that 80% of the features from a flagship you can also find on a mid-range without you paying for that kind of price range, perhaps. I think that's what he's saying.
Okay. If it's not, please let us know what you mean.
Please let us know.
Because it was a little confusing.
Yeah.
I like Uncle Thumb, so I really need to address this. Uncle Thumb says that I'm a driver, so GPS and Volt LTE, for me is VoLTE is very important for me. He tried few mid-range phones. I don't know which one he tried. He said that GPS is wonky, so he just stick to flagship phones. For me, I never had any issues. And I don't know about other tech reviewers, but I'm sure there are. But like me, what I do is that every single time when I review a phone, I put my SIM card in.
Yeah.
And I test phone calls when I'm driving. And I use the phone for a week before I do it. I never come across any issues with GPS or any internet connection or drop of calls. If there's any drop of calls, I feel like it happens to flagships a little more because maybe their processor is concentrated on the performance a little more.
Yeah.
But I never had any issues with mid-range phones. How about you?
In terms of recently, no. But
Yeah.
I think in those days, if you're looking at maybe half a decade back or maybe more, there were phones that had wonky GPS. So if you buy a low-end or mid-range phone, you tend to not be able to connect to satellites and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or it's not accurate and it's slow. So it can happen. I'm not sure what phone he's
He did
referring to.
specify, yeah.
But in these days, it's quite rare. Yeah, for GPS.
And I think that I always tell people this, what you exactly said is that the diminishing returns that you get from you upgrade between a mid-range to a flagship versus the so-called budget to the mid-range. I think maybe the budget ones, yes, but I think the mid-range ones are already very strong in terms of GPS.
Correct.
But Uncle Tom, let us know what exact phone that you use and probably,
He also mentioned VoLTE, so he's talking about voice calls over data, right?
Yeah.
So what was his specific problem?
No, he was saying that it is very important for him. He find that it was an issue, but he says that GPS is a bit more wonky.
Okay.
But I never had any issues with GPS though. And then the two final comments coming from Miguel. Miguel says definitely flagships. I don't want any compromise when it comes to camera, build quality, and overall performance. That makes sense. That's something we talked about. And then Legendary Blood says mid-range are sufficient enough for all usage, and flagship is only for those who still think that it is still 2019.
Ooh, ouch.
So I also didn't really understand.
Are we
what he
left
meant.
behind? We're in 2019 then? We're using flagships?
So he's saying that he feels like people who feels like flagship is the option are still stuck in year 2019.
I kind of agree with him because like I mentioned earlier, the mid-ranges have improved so much and the benchmark is so high.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to buy a flagship if you cannot afford it because a mid-range will do plenty for you, or at least most or everything that a flagship can do.
I agree with him also, him or her, but I still strongly believe that it all comes down to the user itself. It cannot be generalized as much. It all comes down to that, but it's a good topic to debate about in the future. So
absolutely.
Do expect us to do a video
Why
about
don't
this.
you do a video on...
I really think we
flagship
should. Yeah, I think we
mid-range.
should. And then we should also point out the exact models, because if it's just going to be very generalized, then people will be like, hey, what phone are you referring to is good? So I think because we do have a lot of reviews on the mid-range smartphones and all the flagships that we have done. So that will be a very interesting topic to talk about. Okay, before we close the set, upcoming videos. This week's video, the Poco F7 Ultra review is finally going to be done. So by the time you watch this video, it's going to be tomorrow. It's supposed to be out yesterday, but time permits, so we couldn't get it out. So we'll be out tomorrow. Make sure to subscribe. Very interesting video. I know we teased about the Poco F7 Ultra for several weeks already. Apologize for the delay. But upcoming videos, we're going to be reviewing the Google Pixel 9a. Spoiler alert, battery amazing. Really mind-blowing. If you follow us on Instagram, you can see I actually put it up there. I am finally going to be doing a proper full-fledged video on the Sonos Arc Ultra and how to become 7.1.4 Dolby Atmos to 9.2.4. Very interesting video. I enjoyed
with just the soundbar itself, or
just by switching the soundbar and putting an extra sub. So you will like it. I wanted to call Vernon, but he was not free during that time.
Nice.
And Xiaomi's Aircon. So it's already in our studio. We've been using it for several weeks now. The biggest selling point about this aircon is the fact that it can cool a room within 30 seconds. Kind of ask more and see. We just tested earlier again. So that is really mind-blowing. So it's interesting how we're going to be reviewing an AC. And a Xiaomi AC, you know that they are within the ecosystem, I think. So that is great. So that is it for episode 14. We'd like to say thank you guys so much for watching.
Thank you so much.
As usual, if you have any ideas or any things that you want to suggest for our future videos, especially for What the Tech Podcast, we are specifically going to give you all this, I would say, conversation style of way of talking about things, whether or not it's tech news or we can talk on specific topics. Do let us know. No politics, no more politics. Do let us know in the comment section below. And of course, stay tuned for our community post because we'll be asking questions and then we'll refer to that to talk about in our next episode as well. So thank you so much for watching and listening. My name is Adam Lobo.
And I'm Vernon, signing off.
And we will see you guys next week.
One.